I'm an addict. I started using it at a very early age. Well, for me it was early, 13, 14. And I didn't understand that I had a disease. I didn't understand that once I put one inside me, I could not stop. And I don't know if anyone relates to this in the room, but I used to have a physical reaction even before I put one inside me. Because my stomach would start to go, I start getting that obsession to use. My stomach would start to go, and then I want to go toilet, and I start sweating. I haven't even taken a drug yet. I ain't even taken a drug yet. I don't know if anyone can relate with that. Do you know what I mean? And someone said to me once that when you want to go, if you're in a fight and you're in a lot of fear, and you feel like you want to go, like people say, there's a saying like I shit myself, and basically what it means is I was really scared, But what happens is the body starts to get ready, so it's lighter. So if you're going to be in a fight or you need to run, it can do it more effectively. That's what's behind that, And my body does the same thing when it's getting ready to take drugs, in particular crack cocaine. And also, I just want anyone who's new inside the room to know that in here, we don't care what you used. It's not important what you used. We're more concerned about the disease, because we've come to find out that we suffer from a disease, So whether if it was weed, whether if it was pills, whether if it's alcohol, do you know what I mean? Cocaine. It's not about what you use. It's not even about how much you use. I used to think that if you use a lot of drugs, that's what makes you an addict. When I came into the program and I started to do some step work and I started to go through the literature with my sponsor, I realized that wasn't so, because my cousin used the same amount of drugs as I used the same amount of drugs that I used. And when his life circumstances changed, like he got a wife, he met a girl, wasn't his wife at the time. He moved, and he just decided he didn't want to use anymore. And that puzzled me for years. How comes he used the same amount of drugs as me, but he could put it down? And there's me selling everything I've got, going to jail, cannot stop using, And the reason for that is because what makes us addicts is our reaction to drugs, not how much we use. It's our reaction to drugs that makes us addicts, It's the allergic reaction that I have inside my body. This is what makes me an addict, And I went through the whole of my life, as I mentioned, going to jail, many broken relationships. It doesn't matter. Like my daughter, I never saw her for so long, And in the bottom of my heart, there was so many times that I promised myself that I was going to make it to see my daughter, and I wasn't going to leave her standing at a bus stop with her mum. But once that obsession came on me to use, it was impossible for me to do anything else apart from use, So it's heartbreaking. And I went to treatment, and in treatment they used to say things to me like, "Do you love your daughter?" And I used to say, "Yeah." And they would say, "But you wouldn't put down drugs for your daughter, so how could you love your daughter?" And it was shaming, and I felt shame, and I thought, oh my God, if I just get this in my head that I'm being so selfish and I can't use anymore because I need to be there for my daughter, and now they've shamed me, that is going to be it, And after coming to the program and doing a bit of work, I get to understand that that's not it. I have no power whether if I love my daughter or I don't love my daughter. I have no power over this illness. The whole of the program that we have here is based on the fact that Aaron and whoever else suffered like me, we have no power. We have no power. And that's the reason why families are baffled. That's the reason why, wives are baffled. That's the reason why children walk away. That's the reason, because they think, well, how could you, with everything on the line, how could you still do it? And it's not an excuse. It's the truth. We have no power. Our first step is admitting that to ourselves, So if you're kind of in the room today, it probably means you've admitted that fact. Do you know what I mean? So my whole outlook on what we do here is that I need to get power. I go to meetings
because I need to get power. And I need to give it away. I need to share what it was like for me. I pick up my readings in the morning because I need to get power. I pray because I need to get power. But the best thing that I can do is work the steps. It's work the steps. You know, it says in our literature that the steps are our solution. The steps are our solution. What the steps do is get me connected to the power. And I needed to kind of learn that writing out the steps and reading out the steps doesn't necessarily get me connected to the power. It's a program that is backed up with information first and then followed up with action. I have to take action. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting because in our second step, it says that if we pass over this with minimum concern, the rest of the steps won't even work. And the second step is we come to believe in a power, because I'm powerless, I've already explained all of that, in a power that is greater than myself. I need a power that's not just greater than myself, it's greater than my addiction. So it's all about getting connected to power. For those who have been through the work, you know, there's a lot, you would have read the literature, hopefully. And step 2 is the only step that says in the basic text that we pause, and once our belief has grown, then we move on. It's the only step that it says that we pause, because it's vital. And I was taken, and I will mix this with step 7, but I was, you know, if you look at the literature, in the Just for Today, in the basic text, it tells us for newcomers, they strongly advise that you undertake a project of getting to find who your higher power is. Very, very serious. And then it goes on to say some of us were distressed by things that were in the past, and we had to go back and we had to revise and look at things and find out what we knew, and was it the truth? So they keep on going on about this power, get connected to the power. Okay, so I went through step 1, 2, and 3 with my sponsor, and I got to the 4th step. 4th step, moral inventory stuff. You know, basically looking at the stuff that Aaron wants and the stuff that Aaron wants to get rid of. Yeah. I did a step 4 share this the other week. Joe was there, and I was talking about some of the struggles that I have in my life still today, you know. And there's a lot of healing that goes on when I shared my honest self with my sponsor. For the first time, you know, I share myself with my sponsor. You know, I share about, I share about my relationships, about guilt and shame, about stuff that, you know, happens sexually that I wouldn't want to share with anybody else. You know, I get all this stuff, and it's healing because I get acceptance from my sponsor, and I'm sharing it with him, and I'm sharing it with God. God's in the room as well. We invite a power in it, and I really, really, you know, but one of the main things I get out of that is a list of character defects. Character defects. So even though I can talk about what happened to me as a child, you know, what distressed me, what I really want to get to is why, or what am I still carrying that's making me behave the way that I'm behaving today. And when you get, so the situations from my step 4, like the branches, the defects are the roots. They're the strongholds in my life. And how defects develop, normally from a child, normally growing up, what happens is I act on something and it works. Like, for instance, I might lie and it works, and I'll do that again. And I'll do that again and again. And what happens is they start to get entrenched in part of my personality of who I am. I often give an example of my daughter. When my daughter was young, a few of you have heard this before. She was in the bathroom and the toothpaste was missing. I asked her, why was the toothpaste missing? She said to me, it wasn't me, it was her brother. I said, your brother's not inside the house. She's only 4 or 5 at the time, you know, and she's saying, it was my brother, you know. So I kind of said, okay, Navar, it was your brother, you know. And I kind of looked and I thought to myself, why is she lying? There's only a reason she would lie. It's out of fear, you know. Behind every kind of defect, there's fear, you know. So from fear, she begins to lie. Now, if I say to her, which I did on that occasion, okay, Navar, that's okay. In her mind, she thinks, okay, that's the way how I get out of trouble. So she continues that behavior over and over again. until it becomes part of who she is. So if she does that at a 4 or 5 year old, imagine me at a 38-year-old. Do you know what I mean? Who's lived in, this is one example of a character defect, who's lived like that for all them years. It's a part of who I am. You know, so I get this big list from my sponsor. There's envy, there's jealousy, there's sloth, there's self-centeredness, there's selfishness. There's all this stuff that's come out of my step 4. Yeah. And I have to be willing to let it go. You know, the way that my life's gone and the stuff that I've written down, is obvious that I need to get rid of some of this stuff, you know. So I asked my sponsor, like, you know, what do I do with this stuff? And he kept me on a step 6 for longer than the other steps. And he said, well, you try and get rid of it. You try and get rid of all this stuff, all these character flaws that you've got. You try and get rid of it, you know. And I kind of tried as hard as I could to stop being judgmental, to stop being angry, to decrease my ego, to all this stuff. I tried as hard as I could, and I couldn't do it, you know. And then he moved me on to step 7, and step 7 was we humbly ask him to remove our shortcomings. We humbly ask him. So it goes back to that power that I was talking about, that I didn't have. The reason why I kept on using, developing a relationship with a higher power, you know, is so important, because I don't, I mean, this is only my experience with it. You know, this is not the final word. I don't know how you work a step 7 without a God or a power in your life. I don't know. You know, the step says what the step says, you know. So for me, it's really important that I develop on my relationship with a God of my understanding. It's highly important, because if I don't believe in a God of my understanding, if I haven't developed a relationship and faith and trust in that God of my understanding, when I'm banging trouble and I really want to say something to my missus that's going to ruin the whole night, I'm not going to turn to this power. I don't believe in it. I haven't built a relationship with it, you know. Or I'm going to say, God, please help me. I don't want to argue tonight. But it's not going to be of any sincerity, you know. So, you know, for me, developing a relationship with God is highly important in this program, you know. And it takes humility. It takes humility, you know, to say, it says in our literature that humility is like food and water to a recovering addict. I mean, we have to come to a place, or I have to come to a place where I can say, God, I can't do it. When I came into the program, it was around the drugs. So it was like, God, I can't do it. Can you help me? Can you remove the obsession for me to use? So he said, well, I'm not just going to remove it. You go to NA meetings, you get a sponsor, you read the literature, all of this stuff, including prayer, the obsession to use drugs got removed, you know. It's the same thing in step 7, but it's not about drugs. Step 7's a deeper level. Step 7's about me. You know, it talks about a personality change. We need a personality change if we are to stay clean. We need a personality change. I can't change my own personality. You can't. It's impossible. It takes something outside of myself, some kind of help, in order for me to change. You know, now I've got my own little concept around this. You know, I believe that if God wanted to, he could remove every single character defect from me just like that. You know, and I'll be floating into the meeting. Floating. But I think that God wants a relationship with me. This is only my concept on it. He desperately wants a relationship with me. And if it was a case of me, if him just removing everything, I wouldn't need God. So I have to keep on humbling myself and turning to him. You know, and don't get it twisted. I don't do that all the time. I do not do that all the time. What normally happens is I try to run it myself. And I always end up stuck. Always end up stuck, or frustrated with myself, or angry because I shouldn't have said that, or acting out when I didn't want to act out. You know, it's like, you know, God puts me in a position where I've got nowhere else to turn apart from him, and humbly ask him to move my shortcomings. you know, how I was working this step when I first came. In fact, when I first done this step 7 process, I was in Western Supermare and I was in a dry house, and I remember I had the list of character defects, you know, and I went to the beach, got on my knees, prayed and asked God to remove every single defect. And I felt amazing. I felt the Spirit with me. I felt warm. I felt amazing. And I came home, and for the next couple of days, I was on a high. Do you know what I mean? I've done it. I've asked God, and He's removed it. All I need to do now is go to step 7. But then my gyro didn't turn up. Yeah? When my gyro didn't turn up, I realised that it wasn't as easy as a simple prayer and everything gets removed. It's not as easy as that, you know. So for me, I have to keep on going back to the power, working with the power, you know. And slowly but surely, things have been removed. I'm not the same person that came in the room. And what's happened in my journey of recovery is the longer that I stay here, the more flawed that I see that I am. And that's okay, because I'm starting to understand that there's a power out there that will hold me in His arms and say, and I can get strength within that hold. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be, I don't have to do that. I can rely on the power. You know what I mean? But it takes humility. And it says that this is not about wishing and prayer. This is not about wishing or something. It's about prayer and action. It's about prayer and action. Do you know what I mean? So I have to do something. God's not just going to do it all for me, you know. So my job within the 7th step is to ask God to remove this stuff and to try my best to practice the opposite, you know. If I'm not willing, I can ask God for willingness as well. You know what I mean? But I mean, you know, this is where the transformation of the personality happens. I believe it's in the 6th and the 7th step. That's what I believe it is, man. You know, and I can carry on in recovery, you know, making money, you know, sharing all over the place with 1,000 sponsees, doing all this stuff. But if I haven't got that in my life, that connection with God in my life, you know, and asking Him to work on the parts that I can't see, the parts that I can't get to within my spirit, only He can get to that. If I ain't doing that, I could be showing you a fantastic face and dying inside. The disease that I suffer from is progressive in nature. It's progressive. So it's not getting any better, you know, it gets worse over time. You know, we've got a power greater than ourselves, you know, on both end of the scale. So, you know, we've got a destructive power as well that's at work as well. This is what our literature says. That's what our literature says. I'm not talking about my faith. Many of you know that I'm a Christian. I'm talking about my faith. I'm talking about NA literature says we have a power that is destructive, that is working against us. You know, so my recovery needs to be progressive in the same way that my disease is progressing. And my relationship with God needs to be progressive too. It has to be. You know what I mean? The 11th step talks about that we can get unlimited growth. Unlimited growth. So we can stay clean and crazy, or we can head towards freedom. You know, I think that I can't remember what step 7 said. I think this is the road to spiritual growth. This is the road to spiritual growth. It happens in the step 7. And if we're not growing spiritually, we know where we're ending up. You know, so highly important step for me. Highly important step for me. My son, I'm struggling with my son at the moment. I've been sharing about it. Been writing about it. I've been connecting with my sponsor. I come from a place where if you disobey your parents, then beat them. Plain and simple, beat them. And I'm trying my best to do things in a different way, and I'm really struggling. Today, before the meeting, he was meant to come home. He's meant to be home by 4 o'clock. He got home at 6 o'clock. And my mind says, beat him. beat him. He needs a beating. That's what he needs. It's plain and simple. There's 2 reasons I didn't beat him. One is because I knew how to come and do a share and I wanted to sound spiritual. And the second reason is because this is the exact type of time to turn to my power and say, God, please help me. Please show me and guide me the best way to deal with this situation. You know, and it turned out like, you know, what came to me is just tell him just to go to bed. Just when it comes in, just go to bed. You know, just get out of the way so I don't have to make amends to my son, do you know what I mean, for hurting him, you know. I'm going to end on this one. I used to come and work a step 7 by acting on these defects. And then after that saying, God, please remove my shortcomings. It doesn't work that way. The idea is that I can feel the anger from my son, I can feel the rage, and I can revert back to what I know, which is beat him, and bring God in. And I believe, I think that's where recovery lies. It lies in the middle of the thought and the action. It's what happens in between then. If I have enough space and time, you know, and I can bring God in, it can change the course of where the action might go. You know, and that's the way I work it, man. So thanks. I hope someone got something from that. I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing.